2027 is shaping up to be the most important year in American automotive history. 5 cars are about to hit the market that will completely redefine what this country is capable of building. And honestly, the rest of the world should be paying attention. We're talking about machines that blend raw, unapologetic power with technology so advanced it feels borrowed from the future. One of them runs on an engine configuration nobody thought would survive this decade. Another one carries an interior so refined it makes 6-figure European cabins feel ordinary. And there's one on this list that, when you see the performance numbers, you'll genuinely question whether it's street legal. These are real incoming American machines, and by the end of this breakdown, you'll understand exactly why 2027 is the year America takes the crown back. Stay with me, because number 1 on this list is something nobody saw coming. Number 1, the Chrysler 300C, a name that carries weight in American automotive culture, and in 2027, it carries something else entirely. This is not a revival, this is a reckoning. Bigger, bolder, and engineered with a level of intention that makes it feel less like a car and more like a statement. There is a conversation happening right now in the automotive world that nobody expected to be having. Not about a German sedan that got faster. Not about a Japanese luxury brand that got quieter. The conversation is about whether American muscle sedans still have the right to exist, and whether one nameplate, one car, one deeply American idea still means anything in a world that seems determined to move on without it. Here at Premium Automotive Reviews, where we go past the brochure language and past the spec sheets to ask what a car actually means, what it says about the people who build it and the people who choose it, we believe some names carry weight that can't be legislated away. The Chrysler 300C is one of those names, and the 2027 version standing in front of me right now is either the most confident statement this brand has made in 2 decades or the most controversial decision an American automaker has made in recent memory. Here is why. Chrysler's engineers reportedly made one deliberate choice during this car's development that will divide audiences straight down the middle. They kept it a rear-wheel drive sedan. In an era of all-wheel drive everything, when every competitor has hedged its bets and distributed power to all 4 corners, this car sends every last horsepower to the rear axle only. There is a reason for that decision. We will get there. First, stand back from this car and just let it exist in front of you for a moment. The color alone stops conversation. This particular example wears a deep British racing green that seems to absorb sunlight in layers rather than reflect it, shifting from emerald to near black depending on the angle, depending on the hour, depending on how fast the car is moving. From the overhead perspective, the profile is unmistakably 300. That long hood, that short rear deck, that upright rear greenhouse that references the original 1955 letter series car without copying it. But everything has been pressed lower, stretched wider. The rear haunches flare aggressively behind the C-pillar, pulling the quarter panels outward with a wide-body presence that fills the fenders completely. Those multi-spoke, forged alloys, polished to a mirror finish and sized at 22 inches, sit pushed hard into the corners of the car without an inch of gap between tire and arch. The stance is not a visual trick. The suspension geometry was reportedly re-engineered to achieve this fitment as a production intent. A statement that this car means to take up space. The front face is exactly what the 300C should look like in 2027. The signature grille, tall, vertical, commanding, has been reinterpreted with blacked-out vertical bars flanked by precision-cut LED headlight signatures that cut sharp and horizontal, giving the front end an expression somewhere between composed authority and barely contained aggression. Carbon fiber elements extend through a front splitter that is functional, not decorative, designed to keep the nose planted at highway speeds when you are running hard. The carbon theme continues rearward through the side sills, through rear diffuser fins that frame the exhaust outlets with an intentionality that tells you this car was developed by people who understand airflow management. The 4 exhaust tips are round, substantial, and centered inside that diffuser in a 2/2 arrangement that announces the engine's character before you have heard a single note from it. Now we discuss the engine, because this is where the story truly begins. The 2027 300C is powered by a supercharged 6.2-liter HEMI V8, which Chrysler's internal engineering targets have positioned at approximately 797 horsepower. and 715 pound-feet of torque. Those are estimated figures, not officially confirmed production numbers, but they come from credible development sources, and they feel right for what this car is trying to say. The blower sits nestled in the valley of that V8 with a supercharger whine at partial throttle that is audible through the firewall when the cabin is quiet. At idle, the engine settles into a lopey, uneven heartbeat, a burble that you feel in the seat cushion, more than you hear through the speakers. It is not trying to sound polished. It is trying to sound honest. When you press the starter, the engine catches with a heavy mechanical bark, settles for perhaps 2 seconds, then drops into that idle rhythm that makes the whole car feel like something alive that is merely resting. Crack the throttle in sport mode, and the supercharger adds a high-frequency howl behind the primary exhaust note, layering the sound experience in a way that feels violent and orchestrated simultaneously. At full acceleration, the exhaust does not whistle or rasp. It detonates in long, deep waves that echo off concrete barriers and glass buildings in a way that forces the people standing nearby to stop what they are doing. Lift-off throttle and the active exhaust management system allows just enough deceleration crackle to remind you of what just happened. 8-speed automatic transmission, paddle shifted, with a sport mode that holds gears past what you might call prudent, and a track mode that will hold them until the rev limiter intervenes with a firmness that makes the whole car shudder. Pull the door handle on the 300C and the door swings open with the weighted, deliberate movement of something that was engineered with mass in mind. The door seal releases with a soft, pressurized exhale. Step inside and the seat receives you rather than accommodates you. Deeply bolstered sport leather with emerald green stitching that runs in contrast lines across the black hide, a green that is picked from the exterior color and threaded through the entire interior as a signature. The headrests carry embroidered badging. The floor mats carry carbon fiber accents at their heels. When you sit and pull the door closed, the outside world disappears with a solidity that is not luxury car silence in the traditional sense. It is more like the silence of a sealed chamber, a space where outside noise has been managed rather than simply absorbed. The steering wheel is wrapped in perforated leather with carbon paddle shifters directly behind the spokes. It fits in both hands with a diameter and thickness that communicates sports car without sacrificing the ability to place this car precisely at speed. The dashboard architecture is driver-focused with a curved digital instrument cluster that displays drive mode, power output, and navigational information in configurable layouts. Surrounded by genuine carbon trim and lit with that emerald green ambient lighting that runs continuously from the door panels through the center console and into the rear footwells. The center console hosts a rotary drive selector, physical climate controls, and wireless charging, a willingness to preserve tactile inputs that drivers who actually use this car will appreciate. The rear seat is genuinely comfortable, not gesture toward comfortable. Full-size adult comfortable, with enough legroom behind an average front seat position to make the 300C a realistic choice for cross-country grand touring with passengers. The leather repeats front to rear, the green stitching continues, the ambient lighting carries through, and rear passengers have their own climate controls, their own USB connections, and enough headroom that the seating position never feels cramped against the rear glass. The trunk is real. Genuine usable cargo space that will accept luggage for 4 people on a week-long trip. Because Chrysler never forgot that the 300C was always meant to be a car you could live inside. Technology in the 2027 300C has been integrated with an intelligence that respects the driver's ability rather than replacing it. The adaptive cruise system is predictive, reading navigation data to anticipate grade changes and traffic patterns ahead, and adjusting speed with a smoothness that removes driver fatigue on interstate runs without ever feeling autonomous in a way that disconnects you from the experience. Lane assistance is available, but easily dismissed with deliberate steering input. The system understands the difference between an unintentional drift and a driver making a decision. Over-the-air updates allow the performance calibration to be refined without a dealer visit, meaning the car you have in month 12 is factually better than the car you drove home on delivery day. The audio system is a premium multi-speaker setup tuned specifically for this interior architecture, with processing that adapts its equalization to the drive mode, calmer and more spacious when the car is in comfort mode, tighter and less present when you are in track mode, and do not want anything between you and the mechanical sounds you are paying to experience. Now the first drive. The 300C is rear-wheel drive only, which in practice means the first time you apply meaningful throttle in a wet parking lot, you will understand precisely why that engineering decision is controversial. This car will oversteer if you invite it. It wants to rotate. In dry conditions with the adaptive suspension in sport, the handling dynamic is a rear-wheel drive sedan at its most elemental. The front steers with a precision that does not feel artificially assisted. The rear follows with a confidence that comes from correctly tuned multi-link geometry and significant rear track width. And the balance between the two is the kind that makes a skilled driver feel like a better driver and makes a careless driver uncomfortably aware of their own limitations. This is not a car for people who want to be managed. It is a car for people who want to participate. The brakes, 6-piston front Brembo calipers on large ventilated rotors finished in red behind those polished spokes. Stop the car with a progression that is strong, consistent, and communicative. Not abrupt. The pedal tells you what the front tires are doing. And in a heavy rear-wheel drive sedan, that information is not optional, it is essential. The suspension in its default mode is firm enough to handle high-speed direction changes without wallowing, but relaxed enough that expansion joints on American interstate highways do not require clenched teeth. This is a machine that was apparently developed on real roads, not just circuits. At 80 miles per hour in comfort mode with the cabin sealed and the ambient temperature at 70 degrees, the 300C is genuinely quiet and genuinely smooth. The seat absorbs the small perturbations that the suspension misses. The sound system fills the space. The instrument cluster glows softly. It is easy here to forget what is living under that long hood. And that is perhaps the one tension that lives at the center of this car's character. It is almost too composed at legal speeds for its own story. The powertrain is extraordinary, but requires deliberate provocation to express itself. The dynamics are exceptional, but demand intention to explore. The 300C does not force performance on you. You have to choose it. And there is a real argument that in 2027, at an estimated starting price approaching $72,000 for the standard 300C, and pushing into the mid-80s for the fully specified SRT configuration, a buyer in this segment has access to AWD competitors with equivalent or superior all-weather capability. The 300C's answer to that argument is not technical. It is philosophical. This car was built for a specific kind of person, not defined by income, not defined by age, defined by the belief that a car should have a point of view, defined by the preference for mechanical honesty over electronic insulation, defined by the understanding that what you choose to drive is a statement about what you value, and that rear-wheel drive on a car this powerful is not a limitation, but a commitment to a certain kind of experience that is becoming genuinely rare. There are empty highways in the American Southwest, late at night, between cities you will not reach until after midnight, where this car feels spiritually correct in a way that no crossover, no SUV, and no algorithmically tuned sedan will ever match. The road is long and dark, and the machine under you is alive, in a way that requires your attention and rewards your skill. And that arrangement, driver and machine in an honest conversation, is what the 300C is ultimately selling. If you believe that conversation still matters, subscribe to Premium Automotive Reviews and tell us something we genuinely want to know. In a world moving rapidly toward all-wheel drive and electrification, does a rear-wheel drive V8 sedan that demands driver involvement represent everything that is right about cars, or everything that the automotive world has rightfully moved past? Both sides of that argument have real merit. Leave your answer below. The 2027 Chrysler 300C does not ask you to love it. It simply refuses to let you forget it. Number 2. The Mercury Cougar. A nameplate that disappeared from roads and never truly left people's minds, and now it's back with a vengeance. Sleeker, more aggressive, and carrying a design language that feels both nostalgic and dangerously modern. This is what happens when legacy meets an entirely new ambition. There is a particular kind of grief that automotive enthusiasts carry, the grief of a nameplate that deserved better. Mercury, a brand that for decades occupied a space between accessibility and aspiration, between Ford's volume and Lincoln's opulence, and then simply disappeared in 2011 without ceremony, without a final act worthy of what it had once been. The Cougar, specifically, was the car that gave Mercury its identity. A personal luxury coupe that in its finest years made people feel something. And then it was gone. What you are looking at right now is the reason we do what we do here at Premium Automotive Reviews. Because occasionally an automotive story worth telling comes back around. The 2027 Mercury Cougar XR is not a nostalgia exercise. It is not a heritage badge pasted onto a forgettable platform. This is a full-blooded, purpose-built grand tourer built to compete at the highest level of the American performance coupe segment. And there is one decision that Ford's engineering team made about how this powertrain was configured, a choice that separates the Cougar XR from every American performance car in recent memory, that we will get to in a moment. But first, the car itself, standing here in person, demands your full attention. The color is called Amber Cognac Metallic, and in different light it shifts from a rich, deep copper to something approaching liquid amber. It is an intentional choice. Warm, sophisticated, and immediately distinct from anything in the performance coupe landscape. The hood is long, genuinely, classically long, with twin carbon mesh ventilation outlets pressed into the surface that communicate engine intent before a single spec is mentioned. The roofline begins high behind the windscreen and flows rearward in a single unbroken arc. The carbon roof panel sitting above the glass in a contrast that gives the silhouette a fastback quality without compromising the coupe's formal elegance. From the front, the wide hexagonal grille carries a gold Cougar emblem, not chrome, not dark, gold, which in context reads as historical confidence rather than decoration. The slim LED headlamps flanking the grille are precise and sharp, their light signatures cutting forward like the eyes of something patient and aware. The flanks are clean, deliberately, almost provocatively clean in an era of character lines and surface complexity. A single subtle crease runs from the front wheel arch rearward, gathering tension toward the rear haunch before dissolving into the carbon side sill. The rear haunches themselves are wide, muscular, and fully resolved. The wheel arches filled with 21-inch split-spoke forged wheels in gloss dark finish with machined faces. The Cougar emblem centered at each hub. Behind those wheels, the braking hardware is serious. Large cross-drilled rotors with branded calipers sit visibly within the wheel opening, a detail that communicates performance intent to anyone who looks closely. The rear fascia carries a full carbon diffuser, deep and structured, with 4 rectangular exhaust outlets positioned symmetrically at the outer edges. A carbon rear spoiler extends from the deck lid with restrained purpose. Everything about this car from behind says, "I know exactly what I am." Pull the door handle and the door opens with the weight of a well-crafted instrument. Not light, not heavy, precisely calibrated. You step down and inward, and the seat receives you with a firmness that immediately communicates purpose. The carbon-backed sports seat is trimmed in rich saddle tan leather, the same warm amber tone that anchors the entire interior. It is immediately tactile. The leather has a softness that yields under pressure without losing structure, and the stitching, fine and precise, runs in diamond patterns across the door panels and across the rear seat backs visible behind you. The steering wheel is thick, flat-bottomed, trimmed in leather with copper accent, detailing at the center and at the paddle shifter mounts. In your hands, it feels dense and serious. The dashboard sweeps wide in carbon fiber, the instrument cluster sitting low and forward behind the wheel, displaying speed and power information with analog simplicity. framed by a digital outer ring. The central infotainment screen is large but proportionally correct. It does not dominate the dashboard so much as anchor it, surrounded by tactile, copper-accented controls that remain accessible without requiring you to navigate menu trees while moving. The ambient lighting is subtle and warm, a golden tone tracing the door panel edges and lower console that shifts with drive mode selection. In sport, it deepens to a more focused amber. The cabin scent is that specific combination of fresh leather and carbon fiber that settles into your memory permanently after the first encounter. There is no road noise at rest. The acoustic insulation in this car has been engineered with genuine intent. The outside world simply ceases to be relevant the moment the door closes. In the rear, 2 individual seats, trimmed in the same saddle leather, offer legitimate comfort for 2 adults over long-distance journeys, each with a small touchscreen panel in the center console between them and independent climate controls in the B-pillar. This is not a 2+2 gesture. Chrysler, forgive the correction. Ford engineered the rear of this car with the same care applied to the front. The technology throughout has been approached from a human perspective, rather than a specification sheet one. The Cougar OS, Ford's proprietary operating system developed for this platform, learns driver preferences across navigation, climate, audio, and drive mode selection over time, adjusting defaults without requiring manual input. Over-the-air update capability means the car's systems evolve across its life cycle without requiring dealer intervention. Driver assistance features, adaptive cruise, lane centering, automatic emergency braking, blind spot monitoring are present and calibrated to assist without intruding, their intervention thresholds tuned to feel supportive rather than controlling. The system is confident enough to stay quiet when it isn't needed. Now, the powertrain decision. Ford chose to place a twin-turbocharged 5.0-liter Coyote-derived V8, internally projected at approximately 760 horsepower and 680 pound-feet of torque, in a front mid-longitudinal position, sending power exclusively to the rear wheels through a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. The controversial element is the transmission choice. In a segment where nearly every competitor uses a traditional torque converter automatic for its refinement advantages on the road, Ford's engineering team committed to the dual clutch for its mechanical directness, faster shift response, and better power delivery efficiency under load. The trade-off, and it is a real one, is that low-speed urban maneuvering in certain traffic conditions can reveal the transmission's less forgiving personality. It requires a degree of driver engagement that not every buyer will embrace. Ford's position is that the Cougar XR was not designed for every buyer. Imagine now what happens when you press the engine start button. The twin-turbo V8 catches with a low, resonant burst that settles into a confident, even idle, a sound that sits lower in the frequency range than an equivalent naturally aspirated engine, denser and more pressurized. At idle, there is a subtle exhaust pulse you feel more than hear, a rhythmic heartbeat beneath the floorboards. Bring the revs up gently and the sound transitions, the V8 note building steadily before the turbos begin loading, adding a layered urgency as boost pressure climbs. Under full acceleration, the sound is not violent in the way a supercharged Hemi is violent. It is more focused, more directed, the exhaust note rising sharply and cleanly through the rev range while the dual clutch snaps upward with a mechanical precision that registers as a physical event. Each upshift is a distinct, satisfying crack. Each downshift blips the throttle with a mechanical bark. The cabin at full throttle fills with a focused wall of V8 sound at a level that feels deliberate and earned. On a long highway pull in 5th gear, the engine settles into a baritone cruise that carries just enough character through the throttle to remain present without fatigue. Moving the car for the first time, The steering response is immediate and precise. The ratio quick without being nervous. The electrically assisted rack delivering genuine road surface feedback through the wheel rim. The car turns in with a crispness that is slightly surprising given the wheelbase. The throttle response from the twin-turbo system is sharp, particularly above 3,000 rpm, where the turbos are fully pressurized. Below that, there is a brief moment of build, a breath before the full force arrives, which some drivers will find natural and others will want more immediately. The adaptive suspension in its default tour setting is composed and comfortable over broken pavement, isolating harshness without disconnecting the driver from what the road surface is communicating. In sport, the body stiffens noticeably, the car flattening through corners with a directness that rewards committed driving. The brakes are powerful and linear, heavy initial bite, giving way to a progressive pedal travel that allows precise modulation. The seat holds through lateral load with a grip that earns confidence quickly. The Cougar XR feels most correct on a long coastal two-lane road at dusk, the ocean air cooling the evening, the road rising and falling through curves that the car handles with a practiced ease. This is a grand tourer in its deepest meaning, a car designed for distance, for beauty, for the deliberate enjoyment of travel, rather than the mere completion of it. Positioning the Cougar XR within the automotive landscape requires a specific kind of honesty. This is not a muscle car. It is not a sports car in the European tradition. It is something America has not produced with genuine intention in a very long time. A true grand touring coupe with the performance capability to challenge imported European machinery and emotional identity to stand apart from all of it. It has no true direct competitor in the American market. That is either its greatest strength or its greatest risk, depending on how willing the market is to welcome it. Estimated pricing is expected to range from $82,000 to $97,000 depending on specification. For that, you are not paying for a badge or a feature list. You are paying for the return of Mercury, a brand that once stood for something and now, through this car specifically, has the chance to mean something again. That is not a small thing. For the right buyer, it is precisely the point. The person this car was made for is someone who does not make automotive decisions based on quarterly reliability surveys or depreciation curves. They are someone who has driven enough cars across enough countries to know the specific feeling they are looking for, and who has grown tired of finding it only in machines made elsewhere. They appreciate engineering that takes a position. They are patient enough to learn the dual clutch's character and confident enough to enjoy what it offers in return. They believe that the act of driving, truly driving, is one of the last genuinely personal experiences left in a world that increasingly removes the human from the transaction. Before we close, the question worth putting to this community is a genuine one. Mercury was discontinued in 2011 as a brand without enough identity to justify its existence. If the Cougar XR arrives as projected, does it have what it takes to bring Mercury back as a standalone mark? Or should this car exist under the Ford banner where the marketing infrastructure already exists to support it? Both positions have merit. Leave your answer below. And if you came here for conversations like this one, subscribe, because we are just getting started. The 2027 Mercury Cougar XR is the quiet, confident proof that American Grand Touring was never actually gone. It was simply waiting for someone to care enough to build it properly. Number 3. The Chevrolet Corvette Zora. The name alone tells you this is no ordinary Corvette. Named after the man who gave America its sports car soul, the Zora arrives as the most extreme, most technically sophisticated Corvette ever conceived. This is the one that makes supercar owners genuinely nervous. Zora Arkus Duntov spent the better part of 2 decades trying to convince General Motors that the Corvette deserved to be taken seriously. Not as a showroom draw, not as a styling exercise, as a genuine performance machine capable of standing beside the finest sports cars Europe had ever produced. He succeeded. And when Chevrolet finally chose to name a Corvette after him, to put his name on the most extreme, most ambitious version of America's sports car, they were making a statement that carried the weight of 70 years of history behind it. The 2027 Corvette Zora is that statement made physical. And here at Premium Automotive Reviews, where we measure cars not by what a press release claims, but by what the engineering actually delivers in your hands and your nervous system, this one is unlike anything we have ever stood next to. Before we walk through every dimension of this car, there is a hybrid system decision buried in this powertrain that separates the Zora from every other supercar at its price point. Not because hybrid assistance is unusual at this level, but because of how specifically and controversially Chevrolet chose to deploy it. That detail changes everything about how this car behaves at the limit. We will reach it. But first, stand here and absorb what this car communicates before a single system is activated. The color is called torch red, and in full sunlight it reads as something closer to liquid fire than automotive paint. The body surface catches light in panels and planes rather than smooth curves. Every facet of the exterior communicating aerodynamic function through visual language that is simultaneously technical and visceral. This is not a car designed to be admired from a distance. It is designed to make you feel slightly uncomfortable standing close to it, as though the energy contained within it is already straining to escape. The front fascia is a study in controlled violence. Sharp angular headlamp housings flank a wide mesh grille opening, their LED light signatures cutting upward and outward in a pattern that echoes the crossed flag's emblem, centered above the grille opening. The hood is deeply sculpted, twin extraction channels pressing upward from the mid-engine bay beneath, venting heat with visible intent. Carbon fiber canards emerge from each lower corner of the front fascia, not symmetrical, positioned specifically to balance front downforce loads at speed, based on CFD work done in collaboration with Chevrolet's Motorsport division. The profile is low, dramatically so, with a roofline that flows from the A-pillar into a fastback arc before terminating in a full carbon-active rear wing that rises on electro-hydraulic actuators at speed. At rest, the wing sits flat against the body, and the car reads as a single unified form. At highway speed, it angles upward and the Zora's rear contact patch loads with a downforce figure that Chevrolet's team internally targets at over 700 pounds at 150 miles per hour. The side intakes ahead of the rear wheels are large, functional, and aggressive, feeding the mid-mounted engine with the directness of a car that prioritizes thermal management above aesthetic tidiness. Massive 20-inch front and 21-inch rear forged wheels in a multi-spoke machined finish fill the arches completely. Large, red-painted Brembo calipers gripping carbon ceramic rotors behind each spoke. The Corvette crossed flag's emblem appears at each wheel center. Every detail on this exterior exists for a reason, and every reason traces back to lap time. The Zora sill plate greets you as you open the door. Carbon fiber etched with Zora Corvette in white lettering, the crossed flags above it. Lower yourself into the seat and the cabin closes around you in a way that is simultaneously intimate and focused. The seat is deep, bolstered in full adrenaline red leather that matches the exterior precisely, carbon fiber shell backs rising behind the shoulders. The grip is immediate. The seat does not adjust to you so much as it accepts you, and the distinction matters at the limit when lateral loads arrive without warning. The steering wheel is flat-bottomed and trimmed in leather and carbon, its diameter compact, its rim dense and grippy. The crossed flag sits centered at the hub. In your hands, the wheel carries a weight and feedback potential that you sense before the car is even started. The dashboard is a full immersive environment. Red leather sweeps across the entire fascia, interrupted by carbon fiber structural elements and a large landscape format touchscreen that rises from the center console in a portrait orientation. The Zora OS startup sequence displays the car's identity on screen before transitioning to the driver interface. Performance data, drive mode selection, adaptive suspension calibration, and navigation arranged in a layout that prioritizes information without creating cognitive overload. The ambient lighting within the cabin glows at a low red level that matches the leather and intensifies slightly in sport and track modes. The scent at rest is carbon fiber and leather, clean, technical, present. The acoustic insulation in this cockpit is exceptional for a car with this level of mechanical urgency beneath it. The outside world reduces to near silence with the windows up and the drive mode in touring. Now, the powertrain. The Zora carries a supercharged 5.5-liter flat-plane crank V8, the same fundamental architecture as the Z06's LT6. significantly upgraded in this application, internally projected at approximately 850 horsepower from the combustion engine alone. That figure is already extraordinary. But Chevrolet did not stop there. The controversial decision is this. Rather than placing hybrid electric motors at the front axle for all-wheel drive assistance in the conventional hypercar fashion, the approach Ferrari took with the SF90, the approach McLaren pursued with the Artura. Chevrolet's engineers positioned a single electric motor unit integrated directly into the rear transaxle, adding an estimated 150 kilowatts of torque fill, specifically in the 2,000 to 4,500 Meren range, where the supercharged flat-plane V8 builds boost. The result is a combined system output projected at approximately 1,050 horsepower delivered exclusively to the rear wheels. No front motor, no all-wheel drive. Rear-wheel drive only, at over 1,000 horsepower, with the electric system deployed not as a traction aid but as an engine character enhancer. The debate inside the engineering team was reportedly significant. The decision was made deliberately, with full understanding that the car would demand more from the driver as a result. Close your eyes. The start sequence of the Zora begins with the electric system initializing silently, a brief high-pitched whir from the rear transaxle that resolves quickly. Then the LT6 fires. Even with a supercharger fitted, the flat-plane crank architecture gives this engine a sound character that is unlike any pushrod V8. Sharper, more strident at the fundamental frequency, with a layered complexity to the exhaust note that builds through the rev range with an urgency that borders on exotic. At idle, the engine settles into a fast mechanical pulse, busy and present, not the slow, confident throb of a V8 in repose, but something more awake, more impatient. Blip the throttle gently and the response is instantaneous, the note snapping upward before the supercharger's whine layers in above it. Under full acceleration from low speed, the electric torque fills in first, smooth, massive, immediate, before the supercharged V8 reaches its own power band and the sound transitions from forceful to genuinely alarming. The exhaust through the twin center outlets in the carbon diffuser produces a continuous scream between 6,000 and 8,000 reproducent that carries both the violence of American V8 and the exotic intensity of a flat-plane European engine in a single unified voice. Each upshift from the 8-speed dual clutch is a physical event, a sharp mechanical crack that drops the revs and reloads them within a fraction of a second. The cabin acoustic tuning allows this sound in at a deliberate level, controlled enough to remain livable, present enough to be impossible to ignore. Moving the car for the first time, the steering requires your full respect immediately. The rack is fast, genuinely faster than the C8Z06, and the response from the rear axle at the first application of meaningful throttle tells you that this car and 1,050 horsepower to the rear wheels is a relationship that requires trust built over time, not assumed from the start. The magnetic ride suspension in its default setting is composed and surprisingly communicative over road texture. You feel the surface beneath you through the seat and the wheel without the harshness of a purely track-configured car. In touring mode, the Zora is genuinely usable on imperfect roads, the adaptive dampers responding to surface variation with a speed and intelligence that keeps the ride livable without losing the chassis communication that makes this car worth driving. In track mode, the transformation is total. The body stiffens, the steering sharpens further, and the car begins to feel like something that requires track conditions to fully explore. The brakes are extraordinary. The carbon ceramic rotors respond with a bite and linearity under hard application that builds absolute confidence within the first few stops. Compared to the Ferrari SF90 Stradale, which carries a similar combined output figure and a similar hybrid philosophy, the Zora is rawer, louder, and more physically demanding. The Ferrari wraps its performance in refinement and all-wheel drive security. The Zora asks for more. Compared to the Porsche 911 GT3 RS, the Zora is heavier but considerably more powerful and significantly more dramatic in character. Where the GT3 RS rewards precision, the Zora rewards courage. It occupies a space that neither Lamborghini nor McLaren currently fills with the same combination of heritage, accessibility of ownership experience, and outright capability. The Zora feels most correct at the moment just after midnight on an empty mountain road, the air cool, the tarmac dry, the headlamps cutting sharp geometry into the darkness ahead, while the LT6 builds through its rev range at a volume that the surrounding hills absorb completely. This is where the rear-wheel drive-only decision makes complete emotional sense. The car talks to you constantly, through the seat, the wheel, the throttle, in a language that rewards listening and punishes distraction. The one honest limitation: in wet conditions with cold tires, the Zora's 1,050 horsepower to the rear axle requires a level of restraint that not every driver will find natural or comfortable. The electronic stability systems are sophisticated and calibrated thoughtfully, but they cannot fully substitute for all-wheel drive traction in genuinely compromised conditions. This is a real constraint, acknowledged openly by engineers who made the choice deliberately in the name of driving character. Estimated pricing for the Zora is projected in the range of $180,000 to $210,000 depending on specification. For that, you are not simply purchasing the fastest production Corvette ever made. You are purchasing America's answer to a question the exotic car world has been asking for decades: whether a domestically engineered, domestically produced supercar can compete with the finest machinery Europe and Japan have ever produced. Not on marketing terms, but on the road, at the limit, where the only currency that matters is what the car actually delivers. The Zora's answer is unambiguous. The Corvette Zora has no true direct competitor. It is too focused and too powerful to be compared against conventional sports cars, too emotionally raw to sit comfortably beside the electronically sophisticated European hypercars it outperforms on paper, and too American in its philosophy to be evaluated by European criteria. It is a segment of one, a genuine American hypercar that earns that description without qualification. The person this car was built for has driven serious machinery on serious roads and found every experience slightly incomplete. They are someone who understands that real performance is not something you consume passively. It is something you participate in, something that demands skill and rewards it with a physical and emotional feedback loop that nothing else replicates. They are not interested in a car that makes difficult things feel easy. They want a car that makes difficult things feel worth doing. Before we close, here is the question worth putting to this community. Chevrolet made the Zora rear-wheel drive only at over 1,000 horsepower, deliberately rejecting the all-wheel drive approach that Ferrari, McLaren, and Porsche have all adopted at this power level. Is that the right philosophical decision? A statement of driving purity that defines the Zora's character? Or does it unnecessarily limit the car's usability and real-world performance potential in a way that buyers at this price point shouldn't have to accept? Both arguments are worth making. Drop your position below, and if conversations like this one are why you're here, make sure you're subscribed. Because the cars we are covering this year are only getting more significant. The 2027 Corvette Zora is not the car that proves America can build a supercar. It is the car that makes you forget the question was ever in doubt. Number 4. The Plymouth Duster 340, a name that once terrorized drag strips and street corners across America. And in 2027, that spirit returns with modern muscle underneath a silhouette that still looks like trouble. Compact, aggressive, and unapologetically old school in attitude, some legends don't retire, they reload. Somebody in a boardroom killed Plymouth in 2001. No farewell tour, no final statement. Just a quiet discontinuation notice, and a brand that had given America the Roadrunner, the Barracuda, and the Duster simply ceased to exist between one model year and the next. For 26 years, that decision has bothered people who understood what Plymouth actually was. Not a budget nameplate, not a volume play, but the brand that believed performance should be accessible, visceral, and unapologetically American without requiring a luxury price of entry. The 2027 Plymouth Duster 340 is the answer to 26 years of that frustration. And here at Premium Automotive Reviews, where we measure cars not by what manufacturers say about them, but by what they actually deliver in your hands and under your right foot, this one hits differently than anything we have covered in years. Before we walk through every dimension of this car, there is something about how Plymouth chose to configure the forced induction system on this engine. A decision that separates the Duster 340 from every American muscle car in its price range. That we will reach in a moment. It is the kind of engineering choice that tells you everything about what this car's team actually valued. But first, stand here and take in what 26 years of absence looks like when it finally ends. The color is called Hemi Orange, a deliberate, historically loaded choice. This is not a coincidental shade of copper or a fashionable burnt bronze. This is the specific orange that defined Plymouth's most aggressive era, reinterpreted for 2027 with a metallic depth that catches and holds light in ways the original base coat never could. The body itself is a wide, low, genuinely aggressive fastback coupe, not a pony car, not quite a muscle car in the traditional sense, but but something that occupies its own territory between those two worlds. The hood is sculptured and purposeful, carrying a pronounced central power dome with a functional ram air scoop pressed into its surface, flanked by subtle venting that runs rearward toward the windscreen. The number 340 is embossed directly into the hood surface in a raised treatment, not a graphic, not a badge, part of the body itself. From the front, the face is commanding in a way that requires a moment to fully process. The wide octagonal grille opening carries a fine vertical bar pattern in polished chrome, with the Plymouth sailing ship diamond emblem centered at its apex. The headlamp clusters flank the grille in angular housings that push outward and forward, their LED signatures forming sharp, aggressive triangular patterns that communicate intent before the engine has made a single sound. The lower front fascia carries carbon fiber canards on each side, functional, positioned low enough to generate actual downforce at speed, and a full-width carbon splitter that sits perhaps 2 inches above the pavement. This car does not just look low, it is low. The entire body crouches over 21-inch forged wheels with a multi-spoke pattern in gunmetal finish, large red-painted brake calipers visible through each spoke, and staggered tires that fill the dramatically flared wheel arches completely. The flanks carry a graphic approach worthy of the nameplate's heritage. Duster 340 script appears on the front quarter panels in a period-correct font treatment. Confident without being retro, recognizable to anyone who knows the original without being a costume. The roofline flows from the A-pillar in a clean fastback arc, the carbon fiber roof panel sitting flush and dark against the orange bodywork. At the rear, the full-width LED taillight bar runs from corner to corner in a single connected element, the Plymouth name spelled in individual illuminated letters across the deck lid above the Duster 340 designation below it. The rear diffuser is carbon, deep and aggressively finned, with 4 square-tipped exhaust outlets arranged in a 2+2 configuration at the outer edges. A large carbon rear wing rises from the deck lid on adjustable end plates, not a subtle lip, not a vestigial decoration, an actual wing carrying actual intent. Open the driver's door and the sill plate greets you immediately, brushed aluminum etched with Plymouth Duster 340 in clean, precise typography. Every time you enter this car, you step over that plate. The seat receives you with a combination of orange and black leather, the colors separated by contrast stitching that matches the exterior exactly, and the bolsters hold firmly at the hip and shoulder. The Plymouth sailing ship emblem is embossed into the headrest leather, subtle enough that you feel it before you see it. The dashboard sweeps wide in a design that clearly draws from late 1960s Plymouth proportions, curved, wide, visually simple, while the materials are entirely contemporary. Carbon fiber panels run across the dashboard face, orange accent lighting traces the door panel lower edges, and the center stack carries a portrait format touchscreen surrounded by physical controls that you can operate without looking away from the road. The steering wheel is thick, flat-bottomed, trimmed in black leather, with orange contrast stitching and carbon fiber inserts at the 9 and 3 positions. In your hands, it carries a weight and diameter that feels muscular without being imprecise. The instrument cluster reads in clear, large-format analog dials with a digital information panel between them. The center console carries a traditional shifter, an 8-speed automatic with a manual gate and paddle shifters mounted behind the wheel. The cabin scent at this moment is that specific combination of new leather, fresh carbon, and something faintly mechanical that never fully leaves a performance car's interior. There is real silence when the doors close. The acoustic treatment in this body is serious. The outside world does not disappear entirely, but it becomes background rather than foreground. In track mode, that calculus shifts, and the exhaust note is allowed into the cabin deliberately. But in comfort, the Duster 340 is genuinely refined over long distances. Now, the engineering decision. Plymouth chose to equip the Duster 340 with a twin-turbocharged 6.4-liter V8, a displacement figure chosen specifically to honor the original 340's cubic inch heritage translated into liters. Internally projected at approximately 840 horsepower and 780 pound-feet of torque. The controversial element is how the twin-turbo system was configured. Rather than the conventional parallel twin-turbo arrangement, where both turbines spool simultaneously, Plymouth's engineering team specified a sequential twin-turbo system, smaller primary turbo for low RPM response, larger secondary unit coming fully online above 4,000 mem. The result is a power delivery curve that feels nothing like a traditional twin-turbo V8. Below 3,000 RPM, the car pulls with confident, authoritative force. Above 4,000 RPM, and when the secondary turbine reaches full pressure, the acceleration genuinely changes character, the force arriving in a second surge that demands immediate attention and respect. Some engineers on the program reportedly pushed for a conventional parallel setup for its smoother, more predictable torque delivery. Plymouth chose the sequential system specifically because it creates a driving experience with more personality, more drama, and a power character that rewards driver engagement rather than simply measuring outputs at a flat line. Close your eyes. The start button press brings the 6.4-liter twin-turbo V8 to life with a low, authoritative crack that settles almost immediately into a heavy, dense idle. At rest, the engine breathes with a slow, muscular pulse. You feel it more than hear it inside the cabin, a low-frequency presence that communicates mass and displacement. Blip the throttle and the primary turbo loads quickly, the exhaust bark sharpening with a directness that belies the engine's size. On a steady pull from a stoplight in sport mode, the sound below 3,000 repetition is a deep, structured V8 roar, full and round. At 4,000 RPM, the secondary turbo pressurizes fully and the sound changes. Sharper, more urgent, the exhaust note climbing a register as the power multiplies. The 8-speed transmission snaps upward under hard acceleration with a decisive physical crack from each shift, the revs dropping and climbing again immediately. At full throttle between 5,000 and 6,500 RPM, the sound filling the cabin is a continuous layered wall of V8 noise, deep at its foundation, sharp at its edges, a sound that physically registers in your sternum at the right volume level. In motion, the Duster 340 establishes its character immediately. The steering is weighted and responsive, not nervous, not artificially light, a rack calibrated for a car with genuine mass and genuine power. The suspension is adaptive, and in its default setting, it finds a balance between road feel and comfort that works remarkably well for everyday use. On broken pavement, the body absorbs roughness without losing composure. In sport, the chassis firms noticeably, and the car communicates road texture through the seat and the wheel with an immediacy that rewards attention. The throttle below 4,000 RPM is confident and linear, manageable, predictable, something you can use fully in traffic without incident. Above 4,000 RPM, the secondary turbo's arrival requires genuine respect. The rear wheels receive that additional torque load through a limited slip differential that manages traction with intelligence, but in wet conditions or on cold tires, the Duster 340's 840 horsepower is not something to treat casually. That is an honest limitation and a real one. This car will punish inattention. The braking hardware matches the power. Large cross-drilled rotors behind those forged wheels provide stopping power that is immediate, consistent, and deeply confidence-inspiring. The pedal feel is firm and progressive, initial bite-strong modulation easy across the full travel. The seat holds through lateral load with a grip that builds trust across the first 10 minutes of spirited driving and never loses it. This car belongs on a long desert highway at dusk, the sun low and orange, the road ruler flat and endless, the secondary turbo singing at full voice, somewhere around 80 miles per hour, while the exhaust note drifts back into the air behind you. That is where the Plymouth Duster 340 makes complete emotional sense. Wide open, loud, fast, and absolutely alive. Estimated pricing is expected to range from $72,000 to $84,000 depending on specification. For that, you are not simply buying a performance coupe. You are buying the return of a brand that deserved a better ending than it received in 2001, and a car that makes the argument for that return more convincingly than any press release ever could. The value is not in the specification sheet. It is in the feeling of stepping over that Plymouth Duster 340 sill plate and knowing that something important came back. The Duster 340 occupies a position in the automotive landscape with almost no true direct competitor. It is too powerful and too focused to be called a pony car, too culturally specific to be compared to European performance coupes, and too emotionally loaded to be evaluated purely on performance metrics. It is a modern muscle icon carrying the full weight of a resurrected American legacy, and it earns that description through engineering and execution rather than nostalgia alone. The person this car was built for carries a specific kind of frustration. They remember when American performance meant something beyond displacement figures and quarter-mile times. They are someone who believes that a car should have a personality, not just performance, and that the personality should be earned through real engineering decisions rather than marketing language. They appreciate the sequential twin-turbo system not despite its complexity, but because of what that complexity delivers at 4,500 RPM on an open road. They are not interested in automotive appliances. They want something that makes them feel something every single time they start the engine. Before we close, the question this car raises that is genuinely worth debating. Plymouth was killed as a brand in 2001, and the Duster 340 makes a compelling case for its revival. But should Plymouth return as a full standalone brand with a complete lineup? Or does a single halo model like this one actually serve the legacy better by keeping it rare and focused? Both positions have real merit. Drop your answer below, and if conversations like this one are why you're here, make sure you subscribe. Because we are just getting started with what 2027 has to offer. The 2027 Plymouth Duster 340 doesn't just revive a nameplate. It reminds an entire generation what it felt like to believe in American muscle without reservation. Number 5. The Ford Mustang Boss 302. The name that defined what a driver's Mustang truly means. Not the fastest, not the most expensive, but arguably the most honest performance machine on this list. Razor sharp, track-focused, and built for the person who wants to feel every single corner. This is driving in its purest form. The name Boss was never meant to be polite. It was not chosen by a committee or tested in a focus group. In 1969, when Ford put that word on the hood of a Mustang, it was a declaration, raw, unapologetic, and aimed directly at anyone who thought an American pony car couldn't embarrass purpose-built race machinery on a road course. That car won. And then, like so many things worth missing, it disappeared for decades at a time, only returning when someone inside Ford had enough conviction to bring it back properly. The 2027 Mustang Boss 302 is that return. And here at Premium Automotive Reviews, where we dig past the press release language to find out what a car actually means, we can tell you without hesitation, this one means something. Before we get into everything this car is, there is one decision buried in this powertrain that no one expected Ford to make at this price point. A decision that connects this car directly to its 1969 ancestor in a way that goes far beyond badge placement and stripe graphics. We will get there. But first, stand here with me for a moment and just look at it. The color is carbonized gray metallic, and in this light it reads almost like brushed steel, cool, industrial, unadorned. The body panels are a study in controlled aggression. The hood is long and flat, bisected by a functional raised carbon fiber ram air scoop with the Boss 302 designation laser etched directly into the carbon surface. Not a decal, not a badge applied after the fact. The hood's flanking carbon stripes run the full length of the car, connecting the scoop to the Mustang tri-bar tail lamps at the rear with a visual line that pulls the eye from front to back in a single motion. Those tail lamps themselves are pure Mustang DNA. The three vertical red bars that have defined this car's rear identity for over 60 years, now rendered in high-definition LED with a precision that the original design engineers could not have imagined. Beneath them, a full carbon fiber diffuser fills the lower bumper completely, and 4 round exhaust outlets, arranged in twin pairs at each corner, sit within it with the confidence of something that has nothing to prove and knows it. The stance is the first thing you notice at ground level. This car sits low, genuinely track day low. The 20-inch forged wheels, dark finish with machined edges, and the running pony centered at each hub fill the arches completely. Staggered front to rear, to accommodate the rear-biased weight balance, this platform was engineered around. Behind the front wheels, blue-painted Brembo calipers grip large cross-drilled rotors with a grip diameter that signals serious braking intent. The side profile carries carbon aero elements pressed into the lower bodywork, not traditional side skirts, but integrated aero blades that emerge from the body as if they were sculpted into it from the beginning, which they were. Every aerodynamic element on this car was developed in tandem with the body design rather than added afterward. Open the driver's door and the first sensation is the door's weight, firm, solid, with the rigidity of a structure built to tolerate lateral load rather than just occupant entry. Drop into the seat and immediately the cabin closes around you. The bolstered sport seat grips at the hip and shoulder with a firmness that tells you this car was not designed primarily for grocery runs. The seat back carries a Boss 302 embossed graphic in the leather, understated, visible only in direct light, and the upholstery is all black, which in combination with the carbon fiber dashboard creates an atmosphere that is focused rather than luxurious. This cockpit does not ask you to relax, it asks you to pay attention. The steering wheel is thick-rimmed and carbon-accented, the running pony centered at its hub. In your hands at rest, it already communicates a directness, a weight and diameter calibrated for quick inputs rather than effortless highway cruising. Above the center stack, the dashboard carries a row of 4 analog gauges: oil pressure, oil temperature, fuel level, voltmeter, mounted in carbon housing at the top of the center binnacle, a direct homage to the original Boss 302's instrument layout. Below them, the infotainment display carries the Boss 302 identity on its startup screen. The center console between the seats carries the gear lever, a short-throw 6-speed manual with a polished aluminum ball shift knob sitting exactly where it belongs. No rotary dial selector, no drive mode paddle, a proper manual transmission gate, 6 forward gears, and a clutch pedal. That is the decision. That is the one nobody expected Ford to maintain at this level of the market in 2027. The 6-speed Tremec manual transmission was a choice that Ford's performance team reportedly debated seriously. The optional automatic, available on every other Mustang variant, would have made the Boss 302 faster in measurable terms: quicker 0 to 60, quicker quarter mile, more accessible for a broader buyer base. Ford chose not to offer it on this car. The Boss 302 is manual only, period. If you want the automatic, there are other Mustangs for that. This one was built for drivers who believe that the act of rowing through gears is not a compromise, it is the point. The powertrain itself is a naturally aspirated 5.2-liter flat-plane crank V8. The same fundamental architecture that underpinned the Shelby GT350 evolved significantly for this application and internally projected to produce approximately 526 horsepower and 429 pound-feet of torque. No turbochargers, no supercharger, no forced induction of any kind. The Boss 302 breathes freely, builds its power through revs rather than boost pressure, and rewards commitment to the upper half of the tachometer in ways that turbocharged engines fundamentally cannot replicate. The redline is estimated at 8,250 UPM. That number alone explains why this car exists. Close your eyes and place yourself in the driver's seat at startup. The key twist: this car uses a traditional ignition rather than a push-button start, another deliberate choice, and the flat-plane V8 catches with a sharp, distinctive bark unlike any pushrod V8. The idle settles into a staccato, slightly raw pulse, busy, mechanical, present in a way that makes the cabin feel alive even at rest. Rev it gently in neutral, and the sound sharpens immediately, climbing with an urgency and responsiveness that feels almost startling compared to the instant torque of a forced induction engine. There is no turbo spool, no boost threshold. The engine simply responds linearly and completely from idle to the top of its range. At half throttle on a city street, the exhaust note is a deep, even bark through the quad outlets, controlled and purposeful. On full throttle at 7,000 RPM with the windows down, it becomes something else entirely. The flat-plane crank produces a layered, almost exotic scream that sits somewhere between American V8 and European sports car. Raw at the bottom, urgent through the mid-range, explosive and emotionally arresting at the top. Each manual gear change at high revs produces a mechanical crack as the synchros engage, and the next gear loads immediately without hesitation. The sound drops sharply between gears and then climbs again with the same urgency. It is a sound experience that no specification sheet can adequately describe. From behind the wheel in motion, the Boss 302 makes its intent immediately clear. The steering is direct and weighted, heavy enough to communicate genuine road texture through the rim without requiring effort in normal driving. Turn-in is immediate. There is no hesitation between input and response, no buffer from an overly assisted system trying to protect you from the road. The suspension, a specifically recalibrated Magnaride damper system with revised spring rates, lowered ride height, and stiffer front and rear anti-roll bars, keeps the body flat in a way that feels matter-of-fact rather than harsh. Road surface imperfections come through the structure clearly, informatively, as data rather than noise. The Brembo brakes respond with a consistency and progressive feel that builds confidence quickly. The throttle in third gear at 4,000 RPM requires respect. Apply it fully and the rear tires load and push the car forward with a force that is linear and strong. Not violent the way a turbocharged car can feel, but sustained and relentless, building through the rev range until you reach it for the next gear as much from reflex as from planning. This car feels most itself on an empty mountain road at dawn. The air still cool, the asphalt dry and lightly textured, the corners arriving with enough regularity to keep the transmission active and the driver engaged. That is the environment this car was designed for. It is not a comfortable long-distance cruiser. Cargo space is adequate, but not generous. On a 4-hour interstate drive, the suspension's firmness in sport mode becomes noticeable and requires dropping to normal to maintain comfort. These are real limitations and they matter to real buyers, but they exist because the engineers made deliberate choices about what this car would prioritize. and highway serenity was not on that list. Estimated pricing for the 2027 Mustang Boss 302 is expected to land between $62,000 and $71,000 depending on options. For that, you are not simply purchasing a performance car. You are purchasing a commitment. Ford's commitment to the idea that a naturally aspirated, manually shifted, track-capable American sports car still has a place in this world, and your commitment to the idea that driving it the way it was intended is worth the effort it requires. That exchange feels honest and fair in a way that few transactions in the modern automotive market do. The Boss 302 occupies a position in the automotive landscape that is both specific and increasingly rare. It is not a luxury GT. It is not a drag strip weapon. It is a driver's car in the most classical sense of that phrase, a modern muscle icon that has earned the right to that identity through engineering decisions rather than marketing language. The person this car was built for is someone who has driven automatics their whole life and never stopped feeling like something was missing. Someone who has lapped tracks in borrowed cars and spent the drive home thinking about what they would have done differently with 3 pedals instead of 2. Someone who measures a car not by its 0 to 60 time, but by how alive it makes them feel at 6,500 Hermesman in a corner they've been working up to for the last 20 minutes. They do not need to be told why this car matters. They already know. Before we close, here is the conversation worth having in the comments this week. Ford committed to a manual-only transmission on the Boss 302. No automatic option at all. Is that the right call, a pure, uncompromising statement that protects the car's identity? Or does it unnecessarily limit the car's reach and leave performance on the table that buyers deserve access to? Both sides of that argument are worth making. Drop your position below, and if you want more conversations like this one, make sure you are subscribed, because the cars worth talking about keep coming. The 2027 Ford Mustang Boss 302 is not the fastest Mustang ever made. It is the one that reminds you why you fell in love with cars in the first place.